The grandstands were still shaking. Not from the engines, those had already gone silent, but from something else. Something heavier. Something harder to explain. 20 years. That's how long they ruled. 2 decades of dominance. Of checkered flags. Of names etched into trophies and history books. A dynasty that felt untouchable. Until one afternoon, under a blistering sun and the roar of 100,000 fans, it all came apart. Not in slow motion. Not with warning. But in a single, violent moment, sparked by something no one in the crowd could even see. An engine. Not just any engine. The engine. And by the time the smoke cleared, the sport would never be the same again. Because this wasn't just a mechanical failure. This was the collapse of a legacy. And the beginning of a question that still hasn't been answered. How did the most dominant racing dynasty in modern history fall overnight? It started long before the crash. Long before the headlines. Back when the team was still building its empire, race by race, mile by mile. They weren't always giants. Once, they were underdogs. A scrappy outfit operating out of a modest garage in the American South. Late nights. Hand-built parts. Grease-stained hands chasing a dream. But they had something others didn't. Consistency. Relentlessness. And an almost obsessive belief that winning wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. By the late 1990s, they weren't just winning. They were dominating. NASCAR tracks from Daytona to Talladega became their playground. Drivers rotated through their seats, but the results stayed the same. Wins. Championships. Records that stacked up like trophies in a glass case. Sponsors lined up. Millions of dollars flowed in. Their logo became a symbol of excellence. And at the heart of it all was their engine program. Quiet. Secretive. Almost mythical. While other teams chased aerodynamics and driver talent, this team focused on something deeper. Something hidden beneath the hood. Their engines didn't just perform. They endured. Lap after lap. Race after race. Season after season. While competitors blew motors and limped off track, their cars kept going. It earned them a reputation. Unbreakable. Until one day, that reputation cracked. The pressure to stay on top is different than the pressure to get there. When you're climbing, mistakes are lessons. When you're leading, mistakes are threats. And by the early 2000s, the cracks were starting to show, not in their results, but behind the scenes. The sport was changing. New regulations. New competitors. New technologies creeping into a world that had once been defined by raw mechanical grit. And with every passing season, the gap between them and the rest of the field began to shrink. Just a little. But enough to make them nervous. Inside their headquarters, meetings got longer. Tensions grew sharper. Engineers were pushed harder. Because second place wasn't just losing. It was unacceptable. That's when the decision was made. A new powerplant. A revolutionary design that promised more power, more efficiency, and just enough of an edge to keep them ahead. On paper, it was brilliant. In simulations, it was unstoppable. And in the early test sessions, it looked like the future. Drivers reported insane acceleration. Crew chief smiled again. The numbers were exactly what they needed. Maybe even better. But there was something else, too. Something quieter. Something that didn't show up on performance charts. A feeling. A hesitation from some of the engineers. A few voices in the room that didn't fully trust what they were seeing. They raised concerns. Heat management. Durability over long runs. Unpredictable behavior under stress. But those voices were drowned out. Because the team didn't just need an improvement. They needed a statement. And this engine was supposed to deliver it. The season began with promise. Strong finishes. Competitive pace. The kind of results that kept sponsors happy and fans confident. But beneath the surface, things weren't right. Small issues started appearing. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. A vibration here. A temperature spike there. Minor inconsistencies that mechanics brushed off as the teething problems. That's what they called it. Teething problems. But the drivers noticed. They felt it in the steering wheel. Heard it in the pitch of the engine. Subtle differences that didn't belong. One driver reportedly asked during a debrief, "Are we pushing something we shouldn't be?" The answer he got was simple. "We've got it under control." Except they didn't. Because what no one realized, or maybe refused to admit, was that this engine wasn't just pushing the limits. It was rewriting them. And limits have a way of pushing back. Mid-season. A packed track. One of the biggest races of the year. The kind of event where legacies are cemented or shattered. The team arrived confident. Maybe too confident. They had the speed. They had the strategy. And they had that engine. The one they believed would carry them back to the top. Green flag. The race unfolded like so many before it. Their car surged forward. Clean passes. Perfect pit stops. Everything clicking into place. Lap after lap, they led. Fans cheered. Commentators praised their dominance. It felt like history repeating itself. Until lap 173. That's when it happened. No warning. No time to react. A sudden loss of power. Then a violent surge. And then smoke. Thick. Black. Explosive. The engine didn't just fail. It detonated. Shrapnel tore through the hood. Oil spilled onto the track. The car snapped sideways at over 180 miles per hour. The driver fought it, but physics doesn't negotiate. The car slammed into the wall. Hard. Silence followed. The kind of silence that doesn't belong at a racetrack. Emergency crews rushed in. Cameras cut away. Fans stood frozen, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. For a moment, the sport held its breath. The driver survived. Barely. But survival wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Because what investigators found in the aftermath would send shockwaves through the entire racing world. The engine hadn't simply overheated. It hadn't suffered a typical mechanical failure. It had self-destructed. Internal components had warped under stress levels far beyond what they were designed to handle. Materials degraded faster than expected. Structural tolerances were exceeded in ways no simulation had predicted. Or maybe ignored. Rumors started spreading. Had the team pushed too far? Had they known about the risks? And then came the questions no one wanted to answer. Why were there early warning signs? Why weren't they addressed? And most importantly, how many other engines were out there waiting to fail? The fallout was immediate. NASCAR officials launched a full investigation. Other teams demanded answers. Sponsors grew uneasy. Because this wasn't just about one crash. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. The team tried to contain it. Press statements. Carefully worded apologies. Promises of transparency. But behind closed doors, panic set in. More engines were pulled apart. More data was analyzed. And what they found made things worse. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. A flaw embedded deep within the design. One that couldn't be fixed with minor adjustments or quick patches. It required something far more drastic. A complete overhaul. Or abandonment. The decision came quickly. Too quickly for some. The engine program, the one that was supposed to secure their future, was shut down. Immediately. Cars were pulled from upcoming races. Backup engines rushed into service. Engineers worked around the clock trying to salvage what they could. But the damage had already been done. Because dominance in racing isn't just about speed. It's about confidence. And that confidence was gone. Drivers no longer trusted what was beneath them. Crew chiefs second-guessed every call. And competitors? They saw an opportunity. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the Dynasty looked vulnerable. The rest of the season was brutal. Not in crashes or catastrophic failures, but in something worse. Mediocrity. Mid-pack finishes. Strategy errors. Uncharacteristic mistakes. The team that once set the standard was now struggling to keep up. Fans noticed. So did sponsors. Deals worth millions quietly disappeared. Partnerships ended. The aura of invincibility faded. And as the losses piled up, one truth became impossible to ignore. The Dynasty wasn't just shaken. It was ending. Not with a dramatic final race. Not with a heroic comeback. But with a slow, painful unraveling triggered by a single decision. To push beyond the limits. To gamble on an engine that promised everything. And delivered collapse. Years later, the story is still debated. Some say it was inevitable. That in a sport defined by speed and innovation, someone was bound to go too far. Others believe it was avoidable. That the warning signs were there and ignored. But there's another theory. One that doesn't show up in official reports or press releases. A quieter one. It suggests that the engine wasn't just flawed. It was rushed. Pushed into competition before it was truly ready. Driven by pressure. By expectations. By the fear of losing an edge they'd held for so long. And if that's true, then the real cause of the Dynasty's fall wasn't mechanical. It was human. Because in the end, engines don't make decisions. People do. Today, the team still races. Still competes. But it's not the same. The dominance is gone. The mystique has faded. And that 20-year reign? It lives on as a memory. A cautionary tale whispered in garages and pit lanes across the country. About what happens when success becomes expectation. When innovation turns into desperation. And when one engine carries the weight of an entire legacy. Only to bring it crashing down. But here's the part that still doesn't add up. Some insiders claim that even after the shutdown, even after the investigation, even after everything, there were still unanswered questions about that engine. Data that didn't quite match. Test results that were never fully disclosed. And components that were quietly taken off record. Why? What exactly did they find? And more importantly, what didn't they want the public to know? Because if the truth were ever fully revealed, it might change the story entirely. Not just of a failed engine, but of a dynasty that didn't simply fall. It was pushed. And maybe, just maybe, we still don't know by who.